one of the first things we're going to do is introduce ourselves. But before I did that, I wanted to say that this session is the result of some years of conversation with students who stammer and with lecturers who stammer, and there are a lot of us. So there are probably anywhere between 24 and 69,000 students who stammer in the UK. So you are not alone. If you're a student who stammers, you're not alone. And there are probably something like 12,000 staff who stammer within university. So there will be people out there who understand what it's like to study and be successful with a stammer. So that is our starting point. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to introduce ourselves. So you can see actually brilliant range of photographs. I'm going to start left to right. So we have Claire Tupling. So Claire is a research and development manager at AQA, and has worked at the University of Derby for many years, and is presently working with them on supervision and particular projects, a PhD and master's supervision and particular projects. There's myself, Deborah Johnston. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at London South Bank University and a Professor of Development Economics. We have Kirsten Howells, who is the Programme Lead for Adults at STAMMA. And we have Phil Hoddinott, who is a Senior Lecturer in the Institute of Health and Social Care for Adult Nursing at London South Bank University. And so we're coming together to do a joint presentation. We'll be speaking for under an hour, which will give us a chance for questions at the end. So if I go on to the next slide, please. So we're talking about what are the issues for people who stammer in university, and for that we're looking at the full academic landscape. So the teaching, the learning and the assessment. So what happens in lectures, what happens in tutorials, what happens around assessment and around particularly any oral presentations, and what happens in other kinds of interactions like workshops and laboratories. And a crucial part of that is understanding what the options are around reasonable adjustments. And so I'm going to turn to the next slide and ask Kirsten to take over. Kirsten.
Thanks, Deborah. So a lot of this is based within the Equality Act in England, Scotland and Wales, and it's the Disability Discrimination Act in Northern Ireland. But what the Disability Discrimination Act gives us is very, very similar, and the language of the Disability Discrimination Act is very similar to that of the Equality Act. So something important to understand is that stammering is legally regarded as a disability. Now, it's not quite as clear cut as that, because it does depend on the individual and on the situation they find themselves in. So for some people who stammer, stammering will meet the legal definition of disability in almost every situation they're in. For some others, it won't meet it in any, and for many of us, it might meet that definition in some circumstances and not in others. So it's not quite it's always a disability or it's not, but it's certainly for many of us will meet the legal criteria for disability in many situations. And that gives us certain rights, and there's this big right which Deborah has mentioned, which is the right to reasonable adjustments if you have a disability. What that means is that universities have an obligation to make reasonable adjustments to their standard practices and procedures so that you can participate in your learning and development to the same extent as students who don't stammer and don't, aren't juggling those additional challenges. So it's all about how a particular situation or process or procedure impacts on you. So obviously I should have planned an example, but I didn't. So now I'm trying to come up with one off the top of my head. But let's say that you're doing a presentation as a group, and for you, presenting in front of 300 people is really hard, and that is what you're required to do. That's the standard process for that course. It may be that a reasonable adjustment to that would be to present in front of a smaller group, as an example. So it's about how those procedures and practices impact and interact with you and your stammering. Yeah, so they really need to be tailored to the individual and the situation. So you wouldn't expect every person who stammers to have the same reasonable adjustment, and neither would you expect yourself to have the same reasonable adjustment in lots of different situations. They're going to vary dependent on the person and the situation. And reasonable adjustments can also change over time. So what you want in your first year, when doing the example I gave of a presentation, you may feel very differently about that in your third year and be looking to alter that reasonable adjustment. So they're not fixed in time, but they're a really, really useful tool for helping you thrive. And just to give you, to help tune you into these ideas of reasonable adjustments, there are just a few examples here, but it's absolutely not exhaustive in any way because of this idea around tailoring them. But it might be, if this is useful for you and your relationship with stammering, independent on the situation, reasonable adjustments might involve things like stammer speech as well as other diverse voices being welcomed and given time and value within discussions and tutorials. It might be that equal value is given to both written and spoken questions and comments in lectures and tutorials, and whether that's using sort of slightly higher tech things like Padlet or Mentimeter for everyone to get involved in group discussions in large groups, or whether that's about online learning or incorporating things like Microsoft Teams into live learning experiences, and those contributions via the chat function being accorded equal value to the verbal contributions in the room. Some people might have a pre-agreed signal with a lecturer or tutor, where the student can indicate whether they're comfortable to respond to questions in front of the group today or not. We know that stammering varies from day to day. Some people might feel really comfortable to have a go at answering a question in front of a large group on one day and less comfortable to do so on the other, so being able to make adjustments around that. Management of turn taking in discussions so that there's time and space for those of us who stammer to contribute. Yeah, I'm not going to read them all, but you get the gist. They're really thinking of all these different situations and how that can be tailored to enable you to participate actively. I am just going to mention the last one though, because this is one we use a lot within employment setting and employment interviews, and it can be a really helpful one for assessments too, where tutors and lecturers can receive information about stammering and about the way that your particular stammer works and how you deal with those moments in advance, so that your tutors and lecturers, they know what to expect, they understand what it is, and they can support you. And from using this within the employment setting, we actually get a lot of positive feedback from interviewees and also from the interviewers, who say that it's really helpful, that when they understand what's going on, they're actually able to work much more flexibly and support in a really nuanced way. Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Phil, who's going to talk a little bit about how do lecturers feel about reasonable adjustments.
Thanks, Kirsten. Hi, everyone. So, as Deborah says, my name is Phil, and I am a senior lecturer in adult nursing. And as a lecturer who works in a university and have done for about 10 years now, I think we're very much on board with them reasonable adjustments. And as a lecturer, we want our students to achieve and succeed and do the best that they can. So reasonable adjustments aren't new. they've been around for a long time, and really do understand that people learn differently, people perform differently for a range of different reasons. So I think it's really important that students do feel comfortable to have that conversation with, it could be a personal tutor, it could be someone who runs a module or runs a program. And we're very used to having conversations around reasonable adjustments for many things. It could be the way which people learn. So if people have issues around dyslexia, dyscalculia, there could be other adjustments that need to be made around physical health or mental health. So think about people who stammer. It's something else which we would be very happy to have that conversation. And as a stammerer and someone who has studied an awful lot, I really do see how tricky it may be to acknowledge that you have a stammer. I want to talk about reasonable adjustments, but in my experience, both personally and within the organisations that I work with and have worked with, reasonable adjustments are really important. And just to follow on from what Kirsten was saying, there's a really nice graphic that shows a row of animals, and the task is for them to climb a tree. And I think there's a cat, there's a goldfish in a bowl, range of other animals, and just on the graphic it talks about everyone will be assessed the same way. So of course we have to take into account people's reasonable adjustments. And yeah, I think it's just to echo that we want to see people succeed. And I know there's a few slides that talk about how to go around this. So I think I'm handing back over now to Deborah.
I think it's Claire.
Yeah, hi. So this is, I just really want to follow on from what Phil was talking about. So yeah, so the universities, like other organisations, have a duty to provide reasonable adjustments where they're offering a service. And universities are certainly responsive to the needs of students, or they should be. They have a duty to be responsive to the needs of students. And as Phil was saying, that lecturers are certainly familiar with reasonable adjustments and the need to adjust things like assessment. I would also say that it might make students who stammer feel better to understand that lecturers also require reasonable adjustments in order to be able to do their job role effectively. So in my own case, for example, I was able to negotiate my input into meetings with the meeting chair to enable me to contribute effectively. I was also given a space and a mobile phone to be able to manage phone calls and other video calls, so that I didn't have to work in a space that was where I had lots of a distraction with colleagues who were also having telephone calls and video calls at the same time. So I think it's really important to recognise that the staff in higher education are not all able-bodied. So the a university is a diverse place, and that applies to staff just as much as students. So that should help to reassure any students who are concerned about approaching the university over reasonable adjustments. that this is not an unusual situation. And also in terms of stammering, it's important to recognise, as Deborah mentioned earlier on in the presentation, that there are, as well as I can't remember the exact figure about potentially how many students there are who stammer, but there are also staff members in higher education, including lecturers who stammer. And many of those will have negotiated reasonable adjustments to help them do their job. And it also might help students who stammer to be able to have the confidence to request reasonable adjustments if they are aware that there are lecturers who stammer and who do their job effectively. And I think we've got a lot of experience between us as lecturers about how we've approached presentations, about how we approach meetings or other activities that take place in the university. And there's plenty of experience that you can draw on in being able to identify potential reasonable adjustments that might benefit you. I think it's also worth noting as to kind of reiterate what Deborah said, or maybe it was Kirsten, about the type of adjustment that you request might change over the course of your time at university, and that's the same for staff as well. So my own situation changed, and the needs that I wanted supporting changed over time, and I had every right to ask for those different types of adjustments at different times. And therefore, if lecturers are, have this right, then so do students. So I just hope that gives you the confidence to be able to look at our experiences as members of the academy who stammer, who have been in your situation, who have negotiated various types of reasonable adjustments, that you have a similar right, and you can draw on our experiences as well. So I will hand over to, I think it's Deborah. Or is it Kirsten? Sorry.
No, I think it might be. I wasn't expecting this slide to come up, and I'm like, oh, okay. But yes. So thinking about reasonable adjustments, lots of people actually find them really hard to ask for all sorts of reasons. We just want to, I've taken a punt on guessing some of these reasons, and I'm going to try to address each of these points. I think a big one for many people is the words disabled and disability, and their personal relationship with those words, and whether they see themselves as disabled or not. And this might apply to you, that this might not feel like, disability and disabled might not feel like words that feel like a good fit for you, or that you feel comfortable applying to yourself for lots of reasons. And addressing this point, I'd simply advocate separating the legal concept of disability from your personal concept of disability and what that means for you. These two things might align, in which case it's very simple for you. But if that's not the case, I think it's easy to assume that it's a level playing field, but it's not, because the standard procedures which universities use weren't designed thinking of what would it be like if I had a class full of students who stammer. They've been designed with the fluent speaking world in mind, and the Equality Act and the DDA and these rights to reasonable adjustments is just about leveling that playing field. It's about making those procedures suit you. And you can use the legal concept of disability to claim those rights. If you choose not to do that, that is of course your choice, but then it's recognising that the playing field isn't level. So I think that separating these two, the personal and the legal concepts of disability, can be helpful in addressing that point and sort of removing some of those barriers to creating these environments where you can thrive. Some people are concerned that they might be perceived as flawed or weak in some way if they ask for an adjustment. We know that stigma towards stammering exists, so I think it would be naive to say, no, of course, that's never going to happen, not with anyone. But although that risk may be there, there's also the possibility that people might see you as assertive at managing your challenges, at being proactive. It's not all on one side of the coin, all these possibilities. We can't predict how people are going to perceive us, but it's unlikely to be always one thing or always the other. So I think there are also lots of positive attributes that can be perceived by us in seeking, in proactively seeking reasonable adjustments. Another one is that, oh, it's not bad enough for that. I don't deserve reasonable adjustments. Other people are much worse than me. And it's not a competition. It's not about, you know, who's experiencing the most challenges. It's not about who's stammering the most. It's not about who's, like, it doesn't matter if you stammer loads or if you stammer a teensy little bit. It doesn't matter if you stammer very openly, or if you're putting a lot of effort into keeping stammering under wraps or under control. None of those factors matter in terms of seeking reasonable adjustments. It's about making the most of that university experience and creating the environment you can do that in. I've definitely heard this before. It feels like cheating. It feels like some people sometimes feel like reasonable adjustments feel like getting preferential treatment to their peers who don't stammer. And again, I think that assumes that these processes and procedures have been designed with people who stammer in mind, that they are equally suitable for people who stammer and those who don't. It assumes the playing field is level, in which case reasonable adjustments would be giving us advantages. But in general, the playing field is not level, and all the reasonable adjustments are doing is giving you the same opportunities as your fluent speaking peer. So it's not cheating, it's just leveling up. And because of the variability of stammering, some people express a concern, what about if I ask for reasonable adjustments and then they don't see me stammering? I'll be really uncomfortable about that. That's where, when I was talking about the examples of some reasonable adjustments, and the last one on the list, which I highlighted about having that opportunity to give tutors and lecturers information about what stammering is like for me, it also allows us to communicate that if this is true for you, my stammering varies lots. Sometimes I will stammer loads, and sometimes it's like it's hardly there. You know, we can give our tutors and our lecturers that information as a reasonable adjustment, and then you don't have that concern about, is it all right for me to ask? What if I'm not stammering? We can communicate that information as a reasonable adjustment. So I'm doing my best to push those unhelpful voices out of the way and those barriers, so that we can all feel more comfortable using these tools that are available to us. Okay, I am going to be quiet now and hand over.
So thanks, Kirsten. So this next slide is what happens if you're comfortable and you want to make use of those tools. What do you do next? And I'm also going to answer the query from Alex in the chat as I go through the bullet points. But Alex, if that doesn't answer it, please ask that question at the end and we'll really happily go into it. So the very first point is if you're still at the stage where you're applying for university, please share the fact that you stammer on your Ucas form, and you can do that by ticking one of the condition and impairment categories. And I think all of us will find this language quite triggering. We'll all respond to it in different ways, but there are a number of categories which you can indicate that under which you can indicate that you have a speech difference or a speech condition, and it's particularly that category that's called communication impairment. And that's something that you could also share in your personal statement, or if you come to university at interview. And the reason why it's really good to share it even before you get to university is that then colleagues can start thinking about how best they can support you to having that fair and equal opportunity to show how you're engaging with your studies. If you're already at university and it's not something that you've shared yet, then the best way forward is to approach your disability services. And so these services can have different names in different universities. They're often called the disability service or disability advice, or it could be called student support. And so that's the team to be working with. Now, here comes bullet point 3, and this is the bit where I'm hoping to answer Alex's question, but we'll definitely come back to that in the chat. So disability advisors that sit in those disability service teams have been trained, and there is a sector-wide scheme to actually recognise who's been trained as a disability advisor. Have they supported someone who stammers before? Well, that is uncertain, and there'll be some disability advisors, and I've met them, who have never supported someone who stammers, or who might be really unsighted on what stammering is and what it's and the fact that it can change from time to time, and different people stammer in different ways, and actually the same person can stammer in different ways on the same day, right? So in that case, you will have to advocate for yourself. And I've put this on the slide because I think it's really important to recognise that there's likely to be really uneven knowledge out there about stammering and what that means for someone who's at university. And that's why we are, at the end of this presentation, we're going to direct you to a guide that Stammer's put together along with lots of colleagues across the country to advise people in university about the best way to support people who stammer. And you might find this really useful. And there's also other material on the Stammer website. And so that can be really useful, firstly, for educating the disability advisor about what stammering is, but also sharing with them the way that reasonable adjustments can work. Once you've approached a disability advisor, they will work with you on a support plan. And again, those support plans unhelpfully can have different names in different universities. They can be called study inclusion plans, study support plans, sort of names that are like that. But that's a plan that should be drawn up with you and with your views and your needs at the centre. And those advisors will share that appropriately with your lecturers. And they will then start the formal process to get formal reasonable adjustments put into place for you in your course. What I'd also recommend, and this is the final bullet, is if you feel able to, it's worth contacting your lecturers directly to let them know that you're working on reasonable adjustments with your disability advisors. Because remember, it's only the disability advisors who can give you formal reasonable adjustments. Your course tutors and lecturers, they can't do that. But having that dialogue with your lecturers is something that Kirsten said earlier, can be so valuable if they understand it better. And will those lecturers know about stammering? Well, some of them will do, as you've seen around the screen, but others of them won't know. And again, be prepared that you'll have to be an advocate for yourself and for your needs. And so do consider directing your lecturer to the Stammer guide or to the Stammer website. And we've got a host of resources that we want to point you to at the end. And then I'm handing over next. I think this is a joint piece by Phil and Claire.
Thanks, and Deborah. Yeah, so I was just really reflecting on everything that has been said. And I went to school in the 80s and university in the 90s, and things like reasonable adjustments weren't there. So this is really good advice, and it's been an interesting journey without them. And now that we have lots more processes that can help, I think it's really important that they are used. As Deborah said, it's really important to engage with the process, and I think as well it's important to understand what you think you need and to be really in control of what is happening on your course or your module. So you absolutely know, and every module and every university will have some kind of specification that you can look at that talks about how the teaching and learning is delivered. Is there lots of group work? Is there presentations? Talk about the assessment. So is the assessment a group presentation, or maybe if you're on a clinical course, it may be doing something within placement. So I always say to every student who has some reasonable adjustments that it's not a magic wand to make the assessment go away. It just takes into account how you can be fully supported with the teaching, learning, and the assessment. So my key thing is always to be completely in control of what you're doing, and think about how your reasonable adjustments could be applied. And as Deborah was saying, having that conversation with the academic staff, I think that's really important too, because there could be a range of reasonable adjustments, like what Kirsten has already spoken about, but it could be allowing some more time, for example, to answer questions or to present something, or it could be something a bit more detailed. So yeah, my key message here is just to be as organised as you possibly can, in control of your own learning, so actually you can use the reasonable adjustment fully to your advantage. Don't know if there's anything else that you want to come in with there, Claire.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise that it's not just a case of asking for adjustments to the final, the summative assessment. So for a presentation, asking for extra time, or for a greater understanding from your tutors about how your STAMMA might impact on the way that you deliver that assessment, but also some of the things that have been listed here on the slide. For example, lecturers asking questions and group work and discussions in tutorials. And I'm thinking, for example, of the icebreaker. So this is a popular tool that is used in higher education and other forms of education to introduce the group to one another and to the tutor. And it is considered good practice to have that icebreaker activity, but that's maybe not very good for the person who stammers, who may not be able to say their name in the way that they want to say it. They may be reluctant to stammer openly in that environment, and it might impact on the level of contribution. So that is a conversation that I would encourage students to have with their tutor, so that they don't feel exposed or under pressure in that situation, there are alternatives. I mean, it doesn't take a great deal of thinking for a lecturer to come up with an alternative means of doing that ice-breaking activity. So something that I did with a group of students, and I was actually, it was a session where I was talking about stammering. So in advance of the session, I got the students to post something on a Padlet about themselves, and an interesting fact about themselves. And that interesting fact, again, has to be non-controversial. So it was something like what they'd had for breakfast, or their favorite color or something. And so I didn't then call anybody out to say, what is your name? What is your interesting fact? I already had it on a Padlet, and I was able to try and identify the students from the information that they'd given me on the Padlet. And if they wished to speak, that they could speak. But it just put the responsibility on me to do the introducing, rather than put any. I was using it as a demonstration of how the lecturer can take the pressure away from the student. And it could be just something about using a whiteboard or a post-it note to introduce yourself, or there's a whole range of ways that lecturers can modify that kind of activity. And the same with discussions as well. There is the calling people out. So maybe have a conversation with your tutor beforehand to say, I don't want to be called out, or I don't mind being called out, but if I'm happy to be, maybe have a little signal or something. But it's really asserting your rights to be able to ask for those adjustments as well, and to get your tutors to take that request seriously. So if they are, universities are serious about inclusion, they need to demonstrate that, and that includes within the dynamics of the seminar room, as well as in terms of the adjustments for any assessment. So, and also, I think going back to earlier points where we've said that your adjustments can change over time, again, the practices in your seminar groups can change over time as well. So this isn't a set of adjustments or practices that are written in stone. They can change as you go through the course, your time in university. So yeah, that's all I want to add on that point. So I think it's over to Kirsten.
I think this one is it me or is it you, Kirsten?
I think it's you, but I'm happy either way.
So we've come to the end of the presentation. We're just going to end up with some resources that we think might be useful. And I don't know if you're like me, I'm busy now wondering what Claire's favourite colour is. So brilliant ice-breaking activity. So we have got a series of resources that we want to highlight, so that people are aware. You can go away, read them, and if they're useful to you, you can start to use them in the discussions you have with your university. So the first is the Supporting Students in Higher Education Guide. And as I said, that looks at the entire student journey from beginning of applying all the way through to the career service and things like work placements and international travel. And so hopefully that's something that you could find useful and find useful to share with staff in university. There's also specific guidance on OSCE. So OSCEs are observed, structured, clinical. What's the E for, Phil? Examinations, I think. That's what a lot of people who are doing, say, public health type degrees and qualifications will have to be involved in order to demonstrate their learning. And there is very specific guidance on OSCE because they need to consider how you demonstrate that you have met a particular competence. And that is soon to be published. I just noticed there So that is coming. So keep watching the Stammer website. There's also a video there, and I have to say 3 of the most inspiring students. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of people out there, but these are 3 fantastic students who stammer, who were talking to me last year about what their advice would be to other students. So please do watch that if you get a chance. And then we have our Stammer web pages generally about college and university, and that will let you dip into a particular topic. And finally, there's a reference here to Relay UK, which is an app-based telephone system with an operator, and that will get you that will be able to speak what it is you type. And that's something that I know we've used in Stammer on other occasions, because it can be, or we've advised in Stammer on a wide set of occasions, because it's really helpful when people are engaging in formal telephone conversations but feel anxious or feel like they're not able to do that. And if we go then to the final slide, and this gives you general information. So importantly, it gives you that link to the Stammer website, so www.stammer.org, and also gives you information about other things that might be helpful. So our helpline, which is fantastic, and has got a range of people who can give advice, our web chat, and also our email address. And I think with that, we're going to stop recording. And we're going to thank you for listening to the formal part of our presentation, but I'm now going to hand over to Kirsten for questions and answers.